Hi, I'm Bob Gimlin, and this video has a great many things to cover, so let's get right to it. Thing number 1. I had this reoccurring dream when I was pretty young, 8 or 9 years old, somewhere around there, that many would call a dream of a past life, or a window into pre-incarnation, or something of that nature. I'm not sure about that, but I am sure that this type of dream is what spurred the concept of that phenomena, because it was really out of place. The strangest thing about it is that I definitely experienced things in the dream that my young mind had no concept of. And even to this day, I have little moments of déjà vu, where something happens that reminds me of the dream, and I'm genuinely in awe of how my prepubescent self managed to mimic such things. When I decided to make a video on this, I asked my mom if she remembered me mentioning that dream, and my mom immediately rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, that cowboy dream." Yes, the cowboy dream. So here it is. It's a short dream. I'm in this log cabin type building. It's small. I believe only one room. The logs were not unlike Jenga pieces, which I played at that age. I'm sitting at a table and there's a knife, a bowl, and a book on it. I can't recall what book it was. And it's freezing. It's very cold. And I'm cold. And I smell pine, or wood sap. Not from the building itself, but from the fire. There's a small and smoky fire. And I'm not happy because I know there's not nearly enough wood. And I'm very, very cold. Which is mildly intriguing because I don't think I usually recall temperature in dreams. There are narrow windows that have no glass or shutters, and wicked winter wind blows in freely. And I didn't know it at the time, I don't think, when I was 9 or whatever. But looking back, I'm quite sure that I was drunk. And not the pleasant or fun kind of drunk, but the numb, not really feeling it consciously, but still quite drunk kind of drunk. Yeah, I don't think I could have made that association at that age. But now I know it as the kind of drunk that I consider to be the dangerous kind. Because you're really drunk, but you don't feel it at all. And it's a generally irritating feeling. Also, this probably goes without saying, but I'm not me. I'm a gaunt man with prickly stubble. And at the time, I thought the man I dreamt must have been in his 50s or 60s. But looking back now, probably just a drinker in his later mid-30s. Of course, that all took time to explain. But in the dream, it was just a moment. I'm sitting at a table, and then I get up to go pee, because I really had to pee. I stand up, and my clothes are heavy, but I'm still cold, so I snatch the blanket from the bed, and I put it over my shoulders like a cape. I have no hat for some reason. My ears have no feeling, and my boots are completely flat, and my feet sting with every single step, particularly what they call the toe mounds. The door has no knob, just a bar, and I flip it off. And the wind catches it and smashes the door into the interior wall. It's very bright outside. There's snow on the ground, but it's icy. It's not wet. It's icy and frozen. The sky is very, very blue, and the clouds are very, very white. And this is strange too, but for some reason, if memory serves, as soon as I step outside, the dream shifts from me watching through this man's eyes to watching this man head on. So inside, I was seeing it from the man's perspective, but as soon as I step through the door, I'm like watching him from 30 feet away. This next part, even more so than the drunk part, is something that I'm still baffled as to how my 8-year-old brain could have known. I still don't know how my brain could have generated such an accurate depiction of this extremely distinct sensation. But the structure was on a little raised platform, I guess, and my boots made it rattle like a taut drum. And there are these shady steps leading to the earth, and the steps are too small, and I don't really trust them, but there's no banister, so I like Captain Jack Sparrow walk down them, and I probably would have jumped them had my feet not felt like they were full of wood screws. But that sensation of taking steps that are too close together, in unwieldy boots, that's something I've experienced as an adult that I certainly didn't as a kid, and my brain got it exactly right. And as soon as I clear the sketchy stairs, I take 2 crunchy steps in the frozen snow, avoiding footprints I'd made previously, as the compressed ice made them hazardous, but the undisturbed icy snow could punch through. And I make it to the peeing tree, when just like that, I shrug my shoulders in dejection and scowl, just like a breathy grunt. And it's so weird, because in that second I know it's over. Not the dream, over for me. And even though now I'm watching the man, I'm still feeling as if I'm him, if that makes any sense, which it doesn't, but that's how it is with dreams. So now I'm standing by this tree that I pee on, and I realize that I'm being watched, and I know that the only people who would be looking for me want me dead. And I pathetically and half-heartedly go for the pistol on my belt, but it doesn't matter because I don't even know where I'm supposed to shoot, and I'm almost positive the thing won't fire anyway because it's junk, and it's been loaded for a week. And sure enough, As soon as I get my palm on the cold grip, I hear this crack and feel like I got hit by a hammer right below my left nipple. And then I feel like I'm cartwheeling backwards, but I'm not because I can still see and I haven't actually moved. But then I tumble backwards and my vision tunnels to black, and then I feel the stairs on my back because I fell. And then I wake up. In the dream, I never see my attacker, nor do I know how I knew he was there, or she, but evidently I was right. To be fair, from a very young age, I watched westerns with my dad, though the setting of this dream was more 1700s than 1800s, I believe. But there are just so many aspects of this dream that I have no idea how my mind understood them. And for some reason, the most notable of them all was walking down narrow stairs in clunky boots. At my current age, I know the feeling well, but that's really not something 8-year-old me would have had any experience with. And just the boots themselves. Like, those were boots that had absolutely no support. They were just flat. And my parents kept me in suitable shoes, of course. Another, obviously, is being drunk. And not only drunk, but a very specific kind of drunk. Another, of course, would be the sensation of being shot. Now, I've never been shot, perhaps surprisingly, but it was a pretty intense feeling. The feeling that came with it, like the spinning, like you're literally spinning out of control, but you're still seeing straight, so you know you're not. I don't know. And lastly, I guess, just the weird hopelessness. That was the strongest emotion I associated with the dream. It was just this moment of, like, knowing it was over and going for my gun for absolutely no reason other than that's what I know I'm supposed to do. It's like that's what's expected of me, so I'm going to do it, but I know it won't do anything. Maybe even it was just a way to ensure that I wasn't taken alive. I don't know. I don't know what my dream mind was thinking. I went for it even though no part of me believed I'd even get it out of the holster, let alone use it in any meaningful way. I've always wondered about this dream. I too have very vivid dreams very often, but this one seemed different. Thing 1.5. This video only exists because I'm breaking up with my video editing software, VideoPad. The relationship became abusive. I love it, but I hate it, and I deserve better. So, I just can't deal with the constant crashes and glitches. I completely lost 2 videos last month, and then there was an update, but the update is glitchy to the point of inoperable, literally unusable. So this video is a compilation of some stuff that I either cut, edited out, saved for later, or started but never finished. And I would just hate for it all to be lost forever as I transition to a new editor, so it's sad, but semper paro. Thing number 2. Round and rotund have virtually the same meaning, but only one has a T in it. Like the T makes it fancy, like it thinks it's better than everyone. You're not better than round, rotund. That's always been kind of strange to me, like if motund was a word and it just meant mound. Thing number 3. Why I only eat donuts with strawberry frosting. And as a side note, this is one of the reasons I'm so bad at YouTubing. The wording here makes it sound, or so tund, like I only eat strawberry frosted donuts, but that's not the case, that's not what I mean. I meant it's the only type of donut I'll eat if I'm eating donuts. I don't mean to say I only eat strawberry frosted donuts. If I have the choice to select a donut, I will always choose the strawberry frosted one, I think is what I mean. Anyway, when I was a boy, and I mean boy as opposed to man, not boy as opposed to girl, I was never a girl. But when I was a boy, I was on the swim team. This was like junior high, so I think 6th or 7th or 8th grade. So I was 11, 12, or 13. And every Saturday morning I had to go to the stupid pool after delivering my stack of newspapers. Because yes, I really was a newspaper boy, which never sounded absurd to me until just now. But every practice ended with everyone doing 2 laps, I think, and then we got to leave. So like, the conclusion was made by the coach, and then we swam the laps, and as soon as we were done, we got to leave. And every Saturday, swim coach Ryan brought donuts from Dunkin' Donuts, which were just the cat's pajamas, but especially for a tween. So we'd get dismissed, swim our final lap, then the first ones out of the pool were the first ones to get at the donuts, and the last to get out of the pool were doomed to select the least desired donuts. And as it would happen, I was just about the slowest of us all. And I wasn't even a bad swimmer, just because I'm not half dolphin. You know, seconds are a big deal in swimming. So every Saturday, out of breath and soaking, I made it to the donut boxes, and the chocolate and vanilla and Bismarcks were gone, leaving only strawberry frosted donuts. And for whatever silly, prepubescent reason, my 11-year-old reptile mind was quite convinced that I didn't like strawberry frosting, and it really quite irked me that I was being punished for being slow. How dare the reward be based on performance? How unfair. One time, I asked swim coach give me body dysmorphia for the rest of my life, Ryan, if he could bring more chocolate donuts so that I had a chance at getting one. And he said something like, I could do that, or you could swim faster. And that's enough to pee a tween-o. Receiving dispreferential loot is a big deal to a 10-year-old, much like a chimpanzee. I shouldn't have had to get gross donuts just because my cohorts were evidently part dolphin. Basing a reward off merit and skill, it's audacious. And as a side note, I truly believe that debated tidbit about adolescents intrinsically being psychopaths. You don't have to be cruel to be a psychopath. That just tends to be the trait that sticks out the most. And it makes sense why adolescents would be that way from an evolutionary perspective. When you're young and you inherently have no dominance whatsoever by virtue of your age, you gotta be mentally ruthless and cunning to get your way, since you don't have the prerequisite skill or street cred to achieve your wants, which in pre-civilization days would have been necessities. But that all went out the window since the advent of the plow and the refined carbohydrate. Now, my friends, I wish I could tell you that this was the kind of story wherein the donut became the carrot on the stick, and that I used my will and want to hone my discipline to become the fastest and fiercest swimmer on the team, to finish first every time, and to leisurely select my desired delicacy, like a prima nocta for pastries. But this is not that kind of story, and I'm not that kind of guy. Maybe I was bitter, maybe I was curious, but more than likely I was just hungry. Either way, one Saturday morning, I overcame the food autism which had evidently tricked me into believing that any donut ever could be gross, and I selected one of the strawberry frosted donuts, perhaps just to prove to Clark Kent that I would not be duplicit to his donut mind games, and that I would not be the donkey to his carrot. I took one of the strawberry frosted donuts, likely as an act of defiance. Well, let me tell you, my shock was great when I realized it was literally the best donut I'd ever had. The best type of donut I've ever had. And the dough is better too. I literally have no idea why that could be. And ever since that day, I've had a particular desire for those delicate and delicious pink rings. I'd rather have a dozen of these than a birthday cake, if I believed in birthdays, which I don't. I don't really eat donuts anymore, because of the body dysmorphia and all. But strawberry frosted donuts from Dunkin' Donuts are absolutely fire. And should the opportunity present itself, should one of those pale pink and glutinous freewheeling wheels find itself in a dark alley where I myself am trotting on some lonesome and desolate night, then it is in grave peril. Thing number 4. You have become the person that would have made you feel safe as a child, and that's for better or for worse. I was devastated when I realized this. I doubt it's true for everyone, but it most certainly is for me. That's why I'm always saying stuff like, you don't have to prove anything to me. Thing number 5. I saw a meme some time back, and it never fails to lighten my weary spirit. Take any animal's name, and replace all the vowels with O's, and enjoy the ride. A zobro, a porcopano, a rhinoceros, a contopodo, a moorcot, a woozle, a donkoi, a spotter, a chimpanzee, or even the elusive Bornu orangutan. And on the subject of memes, I think this is my favorite meme of all time. When you're chillin' with the homies in the Teutoburg forest, and the trees begin playing Du Hast. Why is it so relatable? Thing number 6 is that my lanky gray aliens video was supposed to be part of this video, but as usual, it turned into a 20-minute video alone, so it became its own. Thing number 7. When I was a kid, I was terrified of ordering at restaurants. I have no idea why. Actually, I do, or at least I think I do. I think it's because when we're young, in pre-adolescence, we're afraid to draw attention to ourselves, and afraid to make mistakes, and be singled out as weak forever. Some people think that's a prey response, but I don't. A leopard just wants to eat you. It doesn't care if you make a fool of yourself. It's a precaution against internal threats, other humans. So it's a defensive mechanism against our own group, like when the cashier says, "Thanks for choosing McDonald's," and you say, "You too," or like calling the teacher mom. Anyway, when I was very young, I discovered a strategy to ease the nerves while ordering at restaurants, and it's stuck with me to this day. But it's not just restaurants, this is applicable in a lot of social settings. Try and figure out what egg people are. Let me explain. Some people are sunny side up, some are over easy, some are fancy and poached, some are raw, some are hard boiled, some have shells in them, some are scrambled, which as we all know can be good or bad. And come to think of it, I don't think I've ever met a deviled egg person, knock on wood. If you're nervous about someone, try and figure out what kind of egg they are. And I'm sorry, but I can't let this go. I was looking at stock images for being singled out, and this came up under bullying. Yes, often the muscular male model type can be found clutching his backpack and gazing off into the forlorn future, while three obviously and far and away physically inferior peers point and laugh in tandem. Indeed, laughing with such fervor that one of them must literally clutch his stomach for support. And people called me crazy for boycotting the Big Bang Theory, but here we are. Thing number 8. Tolkien died in 1973, and as we all know, 9 rings were given to the kings of men, 7 to the dwarves. The elves had 3 of their own, but of course, one was more powerful than the rest. And speaking of the Lord of the Rings, I would like to take a moment to discuss the Rings of Power, and I'm going to try and speak quickly because it requires a great deal of discipline for me to not speak for hours on this. You know what? I'll set a timer. So I don't think I'm naturally a very critical person, and I'm always shocked when I read negative reviews about movies. Like, damn, you could have just said it was bad. You didn't have to take the director's soul. But I kind of have to make an exception for my laissez-faire attitude when it comes to this pile of dog. So the magic of Peter Jackson's trilogy was rooted in the fact that we were introduced to this fantastical world through the eyes of humble protagonists, who were also completely new to the world, so we learned from the perspective of people who were learning. Whereas in Rings of Power, the only people we could learn from are wandering a desert for some reason. And part of me wants to look for some kind of symbolism in the disheveled stranger wandering the desert, some kind of theological metaphor or something. But there's just no substance to it. I think they just hoped someone would think it's deep or something. Seriously, making the most powerful beings in the narrative the main characters, I think was a disastrous decision. Like in the trilogy, Aragorn's the main character, but he's very enigmatic. Like throughout all 3 movies, we know almost nothing about him. And it works because he's enigmatic. Through the hobbits, we can relate to the problems in the War of the Ring. And since we can't do that in Rings of Power, it really just kind of makes the whole thing boring. Game of Thrones was so addicting to watch because all the characters became so fascinating due to reasons that were totally standalone from the geopolitics. And Rings of Power literally made no attempt to do that whatsoever. Personally, I think that this series should have been a subplot within a subplot. It should have been about the events unfolding from the perspective of maybe a single family of normal people who somehow get intertwined in the plot. That way we'd be seeing what's happening from someone who would need the events explained to them like they were 5, which frankly you need in order to understand Tolkien. This series tried to do like way too much in way too small a time. As for the quote, woke elements, well, believe it or not, I don't mind woke so much, if that makes sense. Well, I guess it depends on your definition, really. Because some people will see, like, a gay character in something and then be like, oh, they've gone woke. And it's like, no, that's not woke to me. That's, like, gay people do stuff sometimes. I have a problem with woke when it tries to interject and manipulate. When it does stuff like, oh, I don't know, change one of the greatest stories ever told and then have the nerve to think that they improved it. And if you want to hear my honest opinion, that's not actually even woke. Technically, that's postmodernism. And all postmodernism is saying that everything that currently exists must be bad because it exists, and everything that doesn't exist must be good because it doesn't exist. So make what doesn't exist, and make what exists not exist. And then think you saved the world because your Bible is humanist garbage. And then talk about epistemes. I don't want to ramble, I really don't. But to indicate that men, or male elves, would be like, you're just a woman slowing us down, is so antithetical to this world that it's actually insulting. Because it makes me think that the producers and writers didn't even, like, skim the wiki of this world. Or, like, even bother... I just imagine mocking, like, the king's wife. She was, like, literally chilling with beings of creation myths for an age and a half. And she's someone who, like, stuck her nose up at Sauron's boss. She is not someone who you would describe as having trouble with privileges. She's over 5,000 years old by the time the Rings of Power happens, and 8,000 years old by the time of the War of the Rings. And in Rings of Power, the character we're seeing does not appear to be 5,000 years old. And she's certainly not someone that you would disrespect. Peter Jackson omitted some stuff, and I still have the tiniest grudge that he replaced Glorfindel with Arwen in the Fellowship of the Ring. In the books, he was the one who saved the hobbits from the ring wraiths at the Loudwater. And I get the whole cut for time thing. I wouldn't have included Tom Bombadil either. And if I did Saruman in the Shire, I would have made it really funny. So I'm kind of glad he didn't do that. In the book, Saruman escapes to the Shire and becomes like a petty tyrant, which kind of symbolizes how much his power had fallen. Like so recently, he had controlled huge armies and stretches of land, and now he's just like a little Stalin to the most passive beings in the universe. And though it would have been fun to see, the Return of the King already had like 300 endings. So I get the cut for time thing. But I think he like grasped the big picture splendidly. And it's stuff like having Galadriel be like this weird, unbelieved person being talked down to is just outrageous. I think the producers were so, again, in quotes, woke, that they were trying to fix a problem that wasn't there. Shockingly, it's almost like they created the problem just so that they could fix it. And then, like, this made-up character, Adar, or whatever his name is, father of Uruks. There's this scene where, like, the orcs just wanted to live in peace, and they were so glad Sauron's gone, and there's this quivering orc woman with her little orc baby. They just want to be a little family. That's not what this universe is. Their bodies and souls were completely corrupted by actual evil. They were evil creatures, because it's fantasy. That's how fantasy can work. You're not supposed to feel bad for Sauron, who openly wanted to enslave the world. You don't feel bad for Saruman, who literally traitored and greeded his way to insanity. You don't feel bad for evil murder puppets. You don't need to humanize orcs because they're not human. The best part, though, is when Sauron gave a little inspirational speech. There is no planet where Sauron would give a flying about inspiring orcs. Like, that's not how that works. They were slaves. They were literally manufactured evil monster slaves. You don't need to inspire those. That's what whips are for. I thought the Hobbit movies were okay, but just okay. At least half of it could have been cut. I'm more lenient with them because the book The Hobbit is for kids, for a younger audience. My biggest complaint about the movie franchise was the orcs. Like, Tolkien describes the biggest and baddest orcs as almost man height. So, like, when I see these things, it's like, what? There's nothing in Tolkien's universe that would have been this, nothing evil in Tolkien's universe that would have been this OP. Interestingly enough, I think the Hobbit movies went wrong with orcs in the same way a lot of shark movies go wrong with sharks. Sharks aren't scary because you think a 50-foot one is going to eat your boat. Sharks are scary because they're observant and opportunistic, and they're designed for a domain in which you are not, and you don't see them coming, and there's an awful lot of them. So the fear behind orcs isn't that they're 8 feet tall and carry clubs the size of Dobermans. Orcs are scary because they're clever and cowardly enough to only make a move when they have an overwhelming advantage. Anyway, the most grievous failure of Rings of Power, in my opinion, is simply that it is legitimately boring. Pretend Tolkien's work never existed, and this came out as its entirely own thing. It is just boring, and it is not easy to make Tolkien boring, especially with the kind of budget they were working with. Okay, Lord of the Rings rant over. Thing number 9. I really dislike that we live in an age where people on the internet are so quick to tell people what to do and how to live their lives. It's the you need to age. There are literally tens of thousands of podcasts and videos of strangers telling you what you need to do, and it's weird. Thing number 10, you need to read more. Seriously, every now and then I get caught up in the world of YouTube shorts or Facebook reels, or whatever they are, and they're so damn addicting. And before I know it, I've been scrolling for an hour and I literally feel depressed and stupid. It's not an exaggeration. If I watch that short-form content for any amount of time, I honestly think my cognition and critical thinking suffers. The antidote to this, of course, is reading. It doesn't matter what, but ideally something long-form. And that's just my inexpert opinion. But anything wherein the end relates to the beginning. So when you read a novel, your brain has to engage itself, because obviously you're piecing together what you're reading in that moment to what you've already read. And it's truly staggering to think about how much work your brain is doing when you read something like a novel. Your brain is rapidly piecing together nuance and plot from hundreds of pages ago, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of words ago, even as it powers forward. And that's a brain function you just don't get with short form, especially short form videos, but still not as good as reading. But videos like mine, and I'm not saying mine, I'm saying videos like mine, are good for when you're doing the dishes or going on a walk or something like that. So good thing I obsess over illustrations, right? Again, I'm loath to tell anyone how to live their lives. But if you're a young person or something, the best advice I can give you in general is to read. Have a bookshelf. Maintain its stock. Order it by which books are important to you. Have a happy section and a sad section, an inspirational section. And I can't speak on behalf of library people. If you're a library person, disregard this. I can't do it, though. I dog-ear and highlight and reference the crap out of all of my books. I cannot for the life of me imagine borrowing a book and giving it back. If I've read it, it's mine now, and I'm like a book serial killer. Oh, brother. And if you have, like, a special someone or something come over to your place or your room, and they're surprised or maybe perplexed to see books, just run. Run as fast as you... Well, do what you gotta do first, but then run as fast as you can. I'm not going to point out any studies or anything to support the you should read more notion. I have none off the top of my head, but I do know that sometimes I get depressed and stupid, and I realize it's because I haven't picked up a book in a few weeks. And then it's like, oh wow, I can think again. Neat. If you haven't read anything in a while, I highly recommend anything by Dean Koontz or Lynn Fluelling. I'm currently trying to get representation for a high fantasy novel I wrote, but literary agents be brutal out there. I gave up in May after sending about 40 queries. I just got so sick of waking up every morning to check my email to see some professional calling my kid unlovable. But I'm going to get back on the horse very soon. I have to. Thing number 11 is about platonic forms. Now, this is a concept that I reflect on every day. It's become very important in relation to my ability to make sense of the world. Platonic forms are applied to a great deal of things with a great deal of variance. If you're a philosophy buff, you might find this definition reductive to the point of insulting. So this is just the definition I've settled on. This is how I see it. Forms are things that are true, reoccurring patterns that hold up regardless of context and on multiple levels. It's the kind of thing that once you start to look for them, you see them everywhere. And even though you can't figure out quite why, they seem very important. One of my favorite examples of platonic forms is that you are about 65% water, 60 to 70%. The Earth is also about 65% water, 60 to 70. Not exact, but certainly close. Just as the human body has a comparable salt content to the waters of the world, which is not completely dissimilar to the salt content in the fluid that is injected to create life. So I guess you could say that life is kind of salty. And that's what I'm talking about with forms, like all levels. Somehow it even applies metaphorically in terms of language. I think another good example can be found with precious metals. I find it so fascinating how we, before we had any use for them, were attracted to the shiny. We decided it had value. Wars and the worst things imaginable were done on behalf of that which gleams. Well, ostensibly, we had no idea back then that gold and silver are also the best conductors. The value of these things repeats. For thousands of years it was just shiny. Then it was like, hey, we can bend this stuff to our will, because it has a low melting point. So we can make silverware. And then it was like, oh, silver's antimicrobial, so it's actually a good idea to have silverware and silver platters and silver pitchers. Silver and gold and copper are the best conductors. You mean that stuff we've been hoarding for no reason? And of course, gold doesn't tarnish, be it deep in earth or sea. And that's, of course, why we offer it as a proposition, as an eternal contract. And it's in these platonic forms that I think you'll actually find evidence of divinity. The statement is not, gold is value. The statement is, gold has to be value. It's a rule, and rules can only be set by a maker. So, forms. I like them. If you keep your eyes out for them, you'll start to see them everywhere. We'll go to number 12. And I'll throw in the obligatory, I'm not a doctor, and even if I was, I don't know why anyone in their right mind would think it's cool to blindly believe what anyone is saying. But in my experience, it's good to be okay with being hungry, and that's true all the way down the line. Metaphorically speaking, of course, you should be professionally and personally hungry, because no wolf gets a meal faster than a hungry wolf. And it also spawns patience and discipline. Getting exactly what you want all the time is a recipe for disaster. But believe it or not, this point is actually about being literally hungry. Maybe it's our modern first world diet. I don't know, but I'm convinced that we eat way too much. Or perhaps not even too much, but too often. You know, the average weight of a soldier in the Civil War, pre-enlistment, was 140 pounds, 5'8", and 140 pounds, and that was considered healthy. For my Euro friends, that's about 1.7 meters and 63 kilograms. I'm 5'10"-ish and 165 pounds. And to be fair, my happy weight is 160. But as I approach my mid-30s, maybe it's time to ease up on myself, I don't know. But I can't imagine losing 20 pounds. To be like the Civil War types. And I don't think it's the high-carb diet specifically. Bread has been a main staple for diets for a very long time. I think it's the processing that goes into our carbs that's doing this to us, how refined they are. Back in the day, natural fiber made our bodies relatively inefficient at breaking down sugar. Now, all the processing and refinement is done before we even eat it. It's the difference between eating an apple and drinking apple juice. And gosh, I'm not judging. My main food group is pasta. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the channel before, but I'm a long-distance runner. An average run for me is 12 to 16 miles, meaning I consume a ridiculous amount of carbs. And that brings me back to being hungry. I think my high-carb diet and my running habit has made my metabolism better at fasting than most. I remember it many years ago. It was crazy when I realized that I cannot eat for a whole day, and then the next day too, and literally nothing bad happens, and my skin glows. It's super cool. I also find it kind of enlightening to meditate on how much hunger is merely conditioned. I can't speak for you, obviously, but I know that for me, almost all of my hunger is not related to a need for calories. It's just hormones saying, stimulate me. Here's some footage of me from this spring. Even fit humans have an excess of 200,000 calories of energy stored and ready to go. 200,000 that you carry with you. And I'm not suggesting that you don't eat for 3 months. That's insane. But skipping a few meals can be really emotionally powerful. Usually once or twice a month, I won't eat for about 72 hours. And it's always exciting because after hour 20, I'm like, well, this is impossible. And I feel terrible for everyone in my vicinity, which is no one. But then I master it. And by hour 60, I'm like, I am the tree and the lightning that strikes it. That's a joke, obviously, but it is fascinating once you understand how little you actually need. Our species would never have survived, as no species would, if we couldn't deal with famine for a few days. In fact, I personally believe that our metabolisms are calibrated for that, and that we all have such a caloric surplus because we never experience it. And fasting for days on end is extreme. I'm not suggesting anyone do that. I think it works for me because my body understands the mechanism due to my long-distance running. Again, I'm not a doctor, but it makes sense that running for 15 miles is calorically and metabolically similar to not eating for a day, a chill day. And it always cracks me up because you have all these alleged dietitians and nutritionists who write whole books about cutting carbs and reducing sugar and lowering calories. And it's like, that kind of sounds an awful lot like not eating, except it doesn't work because you're still eating. Also in my experience, and a bit of unsolicited advice based on my personal observations, if you are trying to lose weight, don't exercise. I mean it. I know that's an unpopular opinion, but for me it's true. Your weight is all about what you eat. And if you work out, or when I work out, I should say, I lose all semblance of discipline. Even the illusion of discipline fades away after a really long run or some nutso circuit exercise. So if you want to be a gym rat and get super swole, bro, that's a whole different thing that I don't have any experience with. That's all about gaining mass. That is a whole big to-do that I want nothing to do with. Being consistently active is much better than strenuous workouts. Don't just sit, but don't work up a sweat, because then you won't be able to control your diet. This stuff was so much easier in my mid or early 20s. I was in amazing shape, and all I did was creepily smoke by fires, apparently. Oh, it's so cringy. I don't know why I did this. And on the exercise front, I will say there's a great tragedy there. Because as soon as you get good at any exercise, it's no longer a good exercise anymore. Which is why I don't think my running style is actually particularly healthy. I think my happy place with a run is 15 miles in about 140 minutes. Just under a 10-minute mile. It's jogging, I guess. But I make no attempt to run fast. I just like to chill. I just like to chill and listen to music. Come to think of it, that's why I run for 140 minutes. I just put on a concert. And then after the encore, I'm all done, which is about an hour and 40 minutes. Or of course, sometimes I just listen to the songs of the trees and wind. But it's easy for me. I don't breathe heavily, and I don't work up a sweat unless it's hot. Meaning it isn't really doing anything. And that's kind of why I have a low opinion of gyms. Again, it's different if you want to get buff. But if you want a good exercise, forget running or weights. Try moving your couch to vacuum underneath it, or moving a mattress upstairs. You'll be dead for a week. Remember, once it's easy, it's not a workout anymore. See? It all goes back to forms. And on that front, I want to say, I have a particular disgust for people who mock others who are trying to better themselves. It's so strange to me when people can't understand that when you see maybe a heavier person or someone who doesn't seem to be in the best of shape, hobbling down the sidewalk, bright red and gasping and panting, their 15-minute mile is probably harder than it is for most people doing 10 miles. So, I can't stand when people mock others for trying to better themselves. Everyone's got to start somewhere, and you have no idea what they've been going through. And why not better yourself? What better could you possibly have to do? That was just my thoughts on working out, diet, and most importantly, being hungry. Thing number 12, I think. I think it's on 12. Earlier I mentioned gold and silver. If I had money, which I do not, but if I had money, it would probably be in silver, if I had to pick one investment. Usually the ratio is 12-1, which means, historically speaking, 12 parts silver is the value of 1 part gold. Usually, I guess that would be ounces, or Oz. Which, speaking of which, the Wizard of Oz is all a metaphor for that. The yellow brick road, Oz. The slippers were supposed to be silver, but they wanted to show off the new color technology. So they changed them to ruby, which destroyed the metaphor, but that's okay. But the ratio historically is 12 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. And right now it's almost 90 to 1, which is nuts. Meaning either silver is undervalued or gold is overvalued. But seeing as a modest house is $500,000, I'm going to go with the former, big time. Yeah, let's see. So if the gold-silver ratio is 1 to 90 now, that puts silver at $28 an ounce-ish? $29? But if the gold-silver ratio should be 1 to 12, then that would put silver at over $200 an ounce, which is price discovery. That's where it should be. Who was it, Milton Friedman, who said the free market won't be conned? I worked at a cash register basically my whole adult life. Near a cash register, at least. And this is my collection of pre-1964 coins. Back when coins were made of silver. 90% silver. Because, money used to actually be value. That's how it was supposed to work. Even dollar bills used to just be promissory notes for silver. Yeah, see this bill from 1957, which in reality is not all that long ago, explicitly says $1 in silver payable to the bearer on demand on the bottom, and then on the top it says silver certificate. And the Fed stopped redeeming dollars for silver in 1968, I think. They stopped printing silver certificates in 64. And this is one of those things that if we don't keep saying, people won't remember how it was, and how it should be. Make no mistake, it is very, very odd. It is very, very not good that our money has no value to it. It's a bad thing. Money printed today is monopoly money, and that's why no one can afford anything. And this isn't a secret. Basic economics has understood this for thousands of years. Before everything became monopoly money. But I find it fascinating how, they talk about inflation. Here's your inflation. This dime is worth some $3 in silver. That's how much a dime should be worth without the runaway inflation. Like in old movies when a hamburger was a dime. Yeah, about $3 in today's Weimar world. So I find it fascinating how these coins right here, the silver, what they are made of has not changed. Only the meaning attached to them has changed. And while I have you here, I thought I'd share this. This quarter right here, I was on a run in the woods, and this flew out of nowhere and landed in my mouth. I'm not kidding, I almost swallowed it. It hit the roof of my mouth, in the back, and then landed on the back of my tongue. And I didn't know what it was, and I had to double forward to not swallow it because it was so close to falling down my throat. And I spit it out. I was just what? And it's just one of the many things that happen all the time that make me question literally everything we know about reality. And I wasn't wearing a shirt. I was just running in my shorts, so it certainly didn't bounce off my clothes or anything. Even if there was someone around, which there wasn't, but even if there was someone around, the fact that they could throw a quarter is just, I have no words for it. And then to make matters even more curious, later that year I read a book for the first time called From the Corner of His Eye. And coins manifesting themselves in strange places is a reoccurring theme in the book, and frankly happens to the villain. But, I don't know, it's just a detail worth mentioning. Thing number 14. For the longest time, an embarrassingly long time, I thought Lewis and Clark was one person named Lewis and Clark. I don't know why. I also used to think the phrase, for all intents and purposes, was for all intensive purposes, which still sounds better to me. It makes less sense, but it still sounds better. Oh, and this one's funny. It cracks me up. I thought the term to take someone or something for granted, like when you say, you always take me for granted, or don't take your wife's contributions for granted. I thought the word was granite, as in taking someone or something for granted. Like you're literally considering them to be an inert, difficult, heavy, and burdensome and cumbersome stone. Don't take me for granted. I'm not an unwieldy rock for you to chisel at your leisure. It's funny because it kind of works. And let me tell you, you learn these things fast being a YouTuber. You'll quickly learn the difference between what you know and what you think you know. A mistake I've actually made several times on the channel is switching up the words relegated and regaled. I don't know what that's about. Separately, I could certainly define those words, but I don't know. Maybe a touch of the dyslexia or something. Thing number 15. Sometimes I feel like life is a constant struggle between being too hard on myself and not being hard enough. Thing number 16. I want to briefly discuss AI, artificial, quote, intelligence. As soon as I started working on my lanky gray alien video a few months ago, I got a message from that creepy meta Facebook AI thing, the messenger AI. and I was toying with the image generator to understand this new threat in this new world. And then, on a perverse and rather curious whim, I typed 3 words: lanky, gray, alien, and this is what I got. Why is it in a bedroom? And why is the door not a door? And then perhaps because I'm a glutton for doom, I asked, or ordered, whatever. I asked the AI to describe humanity in a single image. And this is what it gave me. Guys, seriously, it's happening. It's happening and it's creepy and I don't like it. I'm usually not an alarmist. I think most of the things people panic about are rather silly. I say that because humans, and even the Earth itself, despite vicious rumors, are not delicate little Fabergé eggs. That being said, I do worry about AI, because, well, it's Jurassic Park, right? Jurassic Park is definitely in my top 10 favorite books of all time. And the movie does justice to this theme, but in the books it's a little more clear. But in the books, it's a little more clear that the dinosaurs are merely analogous for human hubris, in relation to technology specifically. Dinosaurs running amok are merely a representation, or perhaps even a symptom, of technology run amok. Because AI and dinosaurs are the same thing, in that regard. We created something we don't understand, something untested by the rigors of eternity, and now we're packaging it, we're selling it. And I guess we're just gonna hope that it all turns out well. And even the Jurassic World movies, which, the last one I thought was just awful, but the first 2 are alright. Again, just like Orcs and Sharks, like why? I'm not getting into it again, I'm sorry. But I think my favorite thing to come out of the Jurassic World franchise was Dr. Henry Wu's quote, "You cannot have an animal with exaggerated predator features without the corresponding behavioral traits." And that little gem of a quote in a B- of a movie is quite emblematic of how I feel about AI. You cannot have a consciousness with exaggerated intelligent features without the corresponding behavioral traits. Because what comes with intelligence? Efficiency, laziness, logic, free thinking, big ideas, freewheeling, creativity, thinking outside the box. Do we want a vast system to think outside the box? I should think not. Because in this particular scenario, I suspect we need the box, and it doesn't. And humans are lazy. And only God knows who's going to delegate what to an algorithm. And as of right now, it seems like the only people regulating it are the people selling it, which is just a nightmarish thing. In conclusion, as I mentioned at the beginning, this video only exists because I'm in the process of learning a new video editor. And as I phase my current one out, I just didn't want all the little bits and pieces to be gone forever. Because that's one of the most frustrating things for me about YouTubing, I guess. I'd guess that less than 2% of everything I ever conceptualize ever becomes anything. And honestly, I could probably make 6 or 7 more of these videos with all the little odds and ends I have. And I might make one more someday later. But the problem is that these kind of videos really nerf whatever little place I have in the algorithm. Because so many people skip it or only watch for a few minutes that YouTube thinks that people don't like it. Which is bizarre, because if we're speaking in terms of profits, like overall, I'd probably be better off not uploading this, but whatever. C'est la vie. But hopefully the need to switch editing softwares is a blessing in disguise, and I will redo the 2 videos that were undone with haste. But man, it's so frustrating. It's a hard change, you know? Almost 8 years of practice and muscle memory down the proverbial drain. And it's weird. That's why I said in the beginning that it's like I had an abusive relationship with it. Because I still think very highly of it, but it just doesn't work, so... Anyway, and as always, I appreciate the absolute heck out of you. And anyway, again, thanks an awful lot for listening.